Hello, back again on the Top Recap channel. This time I will tell a movie's entitled Dirty Angels. Let's get straight into the storyline. At the film's beginning, we are taken to Afghanistan, where a man named Amir is having coffee near the market. After finishing his coffee, Amir returns to his house, which is not far from the market. Upon arriving home, Amir goes to the backyard, usually used as a storage area for his dogs. Then, Amir told his men to open the dog cage. Apparently, some American soldiers had been held hostage. It is revealed that Amir is the leader of the terrorists who are very feared in the city. Then, Amir said that today, one of the American soldiers must be killed. Apparently, once every month, Amir will execute one of the American soldiers he holds hostage. After that, Amir's group took the hostages to the market because that's where the execution would take place. This time, Amir will finish off an army captain named Susan by being stoned to death. When Amir gave a stone to one of the American soldiers, the soldier refused.
Pick it up.
Ruthlessly, Amir killed one of the civilians in the market. Finally, the soldier relented and joined in stoning Susan. At the same time, suddenly, 2 helicopters arrived that were assigned to rescue the hostages. Susan was successfully taken by the soldiers, while the others had to fight with Amir's group. However, on one occasion, Amir managed to shoot one helicopter. As a result, the remaining rescue troops decided to leave, and they could only save Susan. After the helicopters moved away, Amir's group immediately killed the hostages who failed to be rescued. A few months later, Susan, who had re-entered the military, was seen talking to one of the military officials. The official said that Susan was still allowed leave and did not need to perform any duties. However, Susan, who didn't want to continue staying at home, eventually chose to train her physique and fitness at the military camp.
Fine. We can go back on the record.
The scene moves to an international school in Pakistan. In a toilet, some students are seen smoking with their friends. One is Badia, the daughter of Pakistan's Minister of Education. While Badia and her friends are chatting, they suddenly hear gunshots from the school gate.
Taliban.
Apparently, a group of terrorists had entered the school. The terrorists forced all the students into a car. Apparently, the leader of the terrorist group was Amir. When all the students flocked out, Badia took her friends to the school's roof because they felt it was the safest place. After all the students were gathered, Amir asked one of the teachers about Badia, the daughter of the Minister of Education. The teacher lied and said that Badia happened to be absent from school. However, Amir still ordered his men to look for Badia because he was sure that Badia was hiding. On the other hand, Badia, who realized that the terrorists would find them, then invited her friends to get down and escape through the back door. Unfortunately, while running away, Badia collided with one of the terrorists. Badia immediately grabbed the terrorist's gun and, without hesitation, shot him dead. Amir, who saw the incident, tried to calm Badia down. However, Badia did not believe him and shot Amir, although she eventually ran out of bullets.
He's coming.
Then Amir's group approached Badia's friends, but Badia bravely kept trying to stop Amir. To teach Badia a lesson, Amir ruthlessly ordered his men to throw 2 of Badia's friends. Long story short, Badia and some of her friends were locked up in a special place in Afghanistan. The reason they were locked up was because Badia was the daughter of the Minister of Education, while her friends were the children of other officials. On the other hand, Badia's mother, who is the Minister of Education, saw the news about Amir's video, which spread widely. In the video, Amir asks for a ransom of $10 million from each family of government officials' students.
$10 million each.
Meanwhile, at the American military camp, Susan is seen training with extraordinary fighting skills until she can defeat her training partner. After finishing training, it turns out that Susan is awaited by a military commander named Travis. Travis said that he wanted to talk to Susan about something important, but he asked her to clean her body first. Then, Susan asked what Travis was doing to meet her. Travis explained that he wanted Susan to join his team, which was currently serving on the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. Initially, Susan refused because she was still traumatized by past events. However, Travis immediately explains that their job is to save some girls who were kidnapped by a terrorist group. One thing Susan should know is that the terrorist group in question is Amir's group.
Sir, the pilot who saved your life.
Hearing and seeing Amir's photo, Susan was immediately willing to go without hesitation. In short, Susan arrived in Pakistan and was immediately picked up by a driver named Abbas.
Drive crazy, Pakistan.
Abbas took Susan to the hotel Travis had prepared without further ado. Arriving at the hotel, Susan was approached by a woman who turned out to be Travis's man. The woman then took Susan upstairs to meet their other colleagues.
McGee. That's Rachel, weapons specialist.
Shooter!
You are the bomb. Oh, and here's our medic.
Hi.
They all introduced themselves to Susan and explained that they would be posing as international medical personnel to enter Afghanistan. Later that afternoon, Susan went to a cafe to meet Travis, who had already arrived in Pakistan. Susan asked when and how they would enter Afghanistan. At the same time, the Minister of Education, or Badia's mother, approached them. The minister said that they had to save Badia and her friends. The minister also informed them that coordination with the border guards had been carried out so the mission could begin tomorrow.
Bring me back my daughter.
After that, Susan went to an internet cafe and contacted her old friend Awina. Awina is a former Taliban member whom Susan had saved from execution by ISIS. Susan asked Awina to find the whereabouts of Amir's group because Awina happened to still live in Afghanistan. The next day, Travis, Susan, and other members left for Afghanistan. Susan again met Abbas, the driver who had previously picked her up at the airport. Susan then got into one of the trucks, which turned out to be driven by Malik, Abbas's younger brother. A few hours later, they arrived at the border, but Afghan soldiers stopped their car. Abbas, acting as the driver, explained that they were carrying medicines. However, the Afghan soldiers didn't believe him and immediately checked the truck. Suddenly, Travis, Susan, and the others panicked because if their weapons were found, they would be executed immediately. Luckily, a major came and stopped the check. Apparently, this major is the right hand of the Minister of Education, who is in charge of the border. The scene moves to Amir's headquarters. He is seen calling one of the hostage students to talk. Here, Amir asks if the student wants to be released. The student immediately says yes, and Amir explains that she only needs to deliver a letter to the police, and after that, she will be free forever. At the same time, Travis, Susan, and their team arrive at the international medical camp to donate the medicines they have brought. They then stay at an inn to strategize. While at the inn, Susan secretly disguises herself as a civilian and goes somewhere. Arriving at her destination, she meets Awina, her old friend who lives in Afghanistan.
I fight for my home, just not very well.
Susan asks about the location of Amir's group. Awina informs her that she has just found the location of Amir's armory. On the other hand, one of Amir's men brought the student to the police station. Immediately, the student handed a letter to the police. However, when the letter was read, there was suddenly a huge explosion that devoured the entire police station.
I was told to give you this.
Betraying your faith in you.
The huge explosion surprised Travis and his men. They assumed that the explosion must have come from ISIS. A few minutes later, Susan arrived at the inn and gave information about Amir's armory. Therefore, they agreed to attack the armory.
We're taking your armory.
Smart boss, let's do it.
Seriously?
We use what's been given to us.
The evening showed Susan and all her members preparing to attack the armory.
Everybody else grab what we need.
However, when Susan and her members were about to escape, an enemy soldier managed to knock out one of Susan's members. Susan, who did not want her members to be left behind, forced Malik to turn the car around. As a result, the war had to happen again. When one of the bodies of Susan's members had been loaded onto the car, it was Travis's turn to be shot by the enemy group. After that, they immediately got into the car and fled the place. The next morning, the scene moves to the minister's right hand, the major in charge of the border. Apparently, Susan and her group came there so that they could bury Travis and one member who died last night. After that, they took turns digging the ground. Susan even continued to dig unconsciously until finally, her friends woke her up and invited her to go up. A few hours later, while Susan was pensive, she heard a voice from the center room. When she looked, it turned out that the Minister of Education was talking with some of Susan's members. The minister explained that he had come to Afghanistan only to give a $10 million ransom to ransom Badia. However, when the money was checked, it turned out to be fake.
You want us to pay ransom in counterfeit bills?
The minister explained that Amir's group was uneducated and could not distinguish between real and fake money. After that, the minister said goodbye and hoped that Susan's group could save the hostages, including her daughter. On the other hand, Badia is called to Amir's room. Here, Amir says that Badia is the bravest woman he has ever met. Badia is also not afraid of Amir's group, even though she is being held hostage. Then, Amir explains that he wants to marry Badia. Amir says great and brave children come from brave fathers and mothers. Amir said that if Badia refused, he would immediately finish all her friends. The scene returns to Susan and her members, who are panicking because an unfamiliar car is approaching them. But apparently, the car belonged to Awina, who Susan had asked to come to her. Inside the house, Awina explains that Amir's group wants a religious leader who is usually called Sheikh. And now, the Sheikh is in the hands of another terrorist group. If they can bring the Sheikh, then Amir will grant their request. In the end, Susan and the others agreed to snatch the Sheikh from the hands of another terrorist group. Then, Susan wanted to borrow Awina's mobile phone, but unfortunately, Awina did not bring her mobile phone because she was afraid of being tracked.
But it's the best chance we have.
In the afternoon, the Sheikh was seen to be taken to another place using a security car. But at the same time, not far from that place, two of Susan's members were monitoring them using a drone. After finding out where the Sheikh was being taken, the two Susan members immediately went to intercept them. In a short time, the two Susan members arrived at the ideal location to attack.
She's coming!
But at the same time, one member named Alice saw a bus about to pass from the opposite direction. After a while, the terrorist group carrying the Sheikh arrived there. Susan and the others jumped into action. Quickly, they opened the car and took the Sheikh away from the place. Unfortunately, several enemy cars attacked just as they were about to leave. Susan and one of her members tried to release Alice, whose leg was stuck on the bus, but the result was unsuccessful. In the end, Alice begged Susan to go rather than all of them getting caught. On the other hand, the shooting was still going on until, on one occasion, Abbas had to be shot. Long story short, Abbas was buried. Malik, his younger brother, was deeply missing Abbas. Susan then approached Malik and continued to try to strengthen him. After that, all of Susan's members gathered because it was being broadcast on TV that Alice had been arrested. However, cruelly, they mercilessly killed Alice. Susan, who could not contain her anger, immediately went to the next room to approach the Sheikh. However, Susan was surprised to see Awina contacting someone. As a result, Susan realized that Awina was a traitor because previously she claimed not to bring a cell phone. After Awina fainted, her mobile phone was checked. Apparently, Awina had contacted Amir's group to come to their location. Susan, who realized Amir's group would arrive soon, asked her members to put the bag of money in that place and let Amir's group take Awina and Sheik. Soon, the Amir's group arrived, and it appeared that Awina had just regained consciousness. They decided to leave because the $10 million and the Sheik they wanted were already in their hands. On the other hand, Susan and her members apparently hid while monitoring Amir's group remotely. Susan then told her members to track Susan's mobile phone, which was in the bag containing the money. With that, they can track the whereabouts of Amir's headquarters. A few hours later, Amir's group arrived at the underground base. They then took the Sheikh to a room and asked him to clean up. Apparently, the Sheikh will be asked to marry Amir to Badia. However, before that, the Sheikh asked who Amir was because he didn't know him yet. Amir explained that his parents knew the Sheikh, but he had never met him. At the same time, Susan and her men were already outside Amir's headquarters. Secretly, they approached until they managed to eliminate one of Amir's men on guard. After that, Susan found a hole that led underground, so they decided to enter through the hole.
No rifles, only shooter.
Once inside, Susan and the others went undercover to look for the hostages and memorize the place's layout. On one occasion, Susan managed to find the hostages who were being locked up. Susan and her members then regrouped to give each other information about what was inside Amir's headquarters. However, they have not managed to find Badia's whereabouts. Susan then ordered her members to install bombs in every corner while she searched for Badia's whereabouts. Susan also gave the reinforcements coordinates so that they could arrive within an hour. On the other hand, it turns out that Badia is ready to get married to Amir. Of course, Badia did it so that her friends would not be killed. The Sheikh, who will marry Amir, is only asked to say one sentence: "You are officially married." Hearing this, the Sheikh explains that this is not the teaching of their religion. Amir emphatically states that he is not a Muslim because he thinks terrorists don't believe in God and religion is just a cover. Upon hearing this, the Sheikh realized that Amir was a terrorist. After the Sheikh marries the two of them according to Amir's wishes, Amir suddenly kills the Sheikh. It turns out that Amir really hates religious leaders, who he considers cowards because they always want peace. On the other hand, Susan and her members are installing several bombs. Shortly thereafter, Amir's right-hand man came and told them they were carrying fake money. Not only that, he also found a GPS-enabled mobile phone in the bag. Amir, knowing this, immediately accuses Awina of being a traitor who deliberately set Amir up. Awina, who basically knew nothing, was immediately killed without being able to explain anything. Then, all the women gathered to look for Susan's members. Until one of Susan's members opened her veil.
Fuck you.
Susan quickly rescued the hostages and met Badia. Then, Susan told Badia and the others to leave through the lift while she looked for Amir.
Come on, move! On the floor! On the floor! On the floor!
On one occasion, Susan finally confronts Amir. Here, Amir is very surprised because he is fighting Susan, the person who failed to be executed at the beginning of the film. After a long duel, Susan finally manages to finish Amir off. In short, when Susan and the others were about to leave, Susan realized that one of her members was dying from being buried under rocks. Susan tried to save the member, but the member asked Susan to leave immediately before the bomb destroyed the whole place.
Get them home.
As a result, Susan and the others were forced to go out with the hostages they had managed to save. Later, rescue forces arrived, and everyone was immediately evacuated. When Susan told Malik to get into the helicopter, Malik asked if Susan would also come. Susan replied that she would save one member they had left behind, so Malik decided to come with Susan. Before re-entering Amir's headquarters, Malik played his favorite rock music. Then, the film ended.